The specifics came as a shock to me. The idea that they would conduct this sort of brutality is not shocking at all, unfortunately. But the specific news of these killings certainly came as a shock.
I understand you were held in the same prison as some of these activists, even sharing food rations with them. Can you share with us your experience and your time with them?
Yeah, that's right. So this has a very personal aspect to me. In the last few months that I was imprisoned in Myanmar, I was in Insein prison and in that part of Insein prison where death row was and the death row prisoners. So the people who may be executed tomorrow were actually my fellow prisoners. They were incredibly generous to me, even though they're in obviously a desperate situation, but they felt sorry for me as the sort of foreigner. And I think they thought that, I was probably sick of Burmese food and rice and things like that. So they actually shared their bread ration to me. It was a special ration actually given to prisoners on death row, and they gave the bread to me as this foreigner, who they thought felt lonely and far from home, etc. So, yeah, just extraordinarily generous to me. I was able to reciprocate a little bit, but, the benefit was mostly one way. And so I just felt, immense privilege to know them and incredible thankfulness at the time. But now, it has that extra sting, if you like, just because of that personal contact.
And what can you tell us about the work of the activists who are being detained? What has led to them finding themselves in this situation?
So after the military coup that took place in February 2021, Myanmar people very quickly rose up in opposition against the military regime, who responded with incredible brutality. And so really what's happened since is the people have resisted that with arms themselves. So the people being executed are part of that process of the people really pushing back in very real ways, very kinetic ways, rather than just simply protesting itself. So it's part of the broader struggle, if you like, in Myanmar between the military junta and the Burmese people.
And you have inside knowledge of Myanmar's justice system. What procedures would they have gone through to end up on death row?
Yeah, unfortunately, it would have been a total farce. There really is no legal system in Myanmar. There's no real justice system. As soon as somebody is accused of something by the regime, you will be found automatically guilty, regardless of any procedure. In fact, really, there is no procedure. That's certainly how it was for me, and it is for them as well. Notwithstanding the severity of the verdict.
Do we know for certain that these executions will be going ahead? What about the lack of any official acknowledgement that this could be taking place?
Yeah, it's not 100% sure, but what's worrying is that the trend is more or less the same as it was a year or so ago when there were these killings, so these executions. So there's a certain pattern that seems to be being followed. I'm still hopeful it won't take place, and in fact, talking about it in this way, I'm sort of somewhat hopeful that this might shame the regime into not going ahead if that is their plan. But yeah, it worries me that things are following a certain direction that they've gone before.
What can countries such as Australia do to help, and what's the international community doing?
The unfortunate thing is that there's not a lot, frankly. This regime is not really listening to anyone anymore. Of course, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't do anything for our own values. We need to be very firm, I think, in stating our absolute abhorrence for this. And I'm sure Australia will do that. We've done that in the past. We did it that last time that I mentioned. And so I'm very hopeful that we'll do that. I guess the important thing, it'd be great if Australia and other countries could get on the front foot before anything happens and to express their abhorrence to the regime and suggest that, that there would be repercussions if they go down this track.
What is the reaction from the junta to such expressions? Does it fear international repercussions?
Well, it does in some way, because the military in Myanmar is very much on the back foot at the moment. It's losing militarily and it's losing economically. So specifically, it's running out of foreign exchange. And so one thing the international community can do, and Australia can join in this, is to put financial sanctions on Myanmar. We've got some already, and it's great that Australia has gone down that route, but we can tighten up a bit further and make sure that the Myanmar military doesn't have the foreign exchange it desperately needs to buy the advanced weaponry that really is the one advantage they have over the opposition. So that's a very practical thing that a country like Australia can do.
It's a really difficult time for families of the activists who are on death row. Do they hold any hope that the junta won't carry out these brutal executions?
I would imagine very little. The whole way in which these things are done in Myanmar are pure horror, quite frankly. The jail conditions and so on are just awful. And even the way of execution, hanging in the sort of open air there in the Insein prison, which is a Victorian horror all to itself. There's nothing good about the process. So even that would be something that the families would have to grapple with. And it would torment them, I would imagine.
Does it show the junta's desperation at trying to keep the regime afloat, that they're resorting to using barbaric methods such as this?
Yeah, it tells us a lot. It tells us about their desperation. It tells us that they're losing. And really the only thing they have left is to basically spread this horror, to send a message to the Burmese people that this is what will happen to you if you oppose us. Luckily, I suppose one could say that the Burmese people are not listening to that. They're understanding the horror, but they're meeting it in opposition. And so I don't think it will work, but yeah, the regime seems to be bent on this sort of direction of horror as a way of trying to suppress the people.
Professor Sean Turnell, thank you so much for talking to us tonight. We really appreciate it.
Thanks very much. Thank you.